Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to IAB Europe's Guide to Supply Path Optimization webinar. We're just going to give it a couple of seconds as you all connect. My name is Helen Muzzard, and I'm the Marketing and Industry Strategy Director at IAB Europe. And I'm delighted today to be joined by members of our Programmatic Trading Committee, who will be discussing our recently launched Supply Path Optimization Guide, which we launched last month to educate all stakeholders on the importance of a good SPO strategy and implementation. As with all of our events, we are live today, as you will see, and you'll be connecting very shortly. It will be recorded so that if anyone has missed this, they can watch it at a later date. So moving on to our agenda, shortly I'm going to hand over to David Goddard, who will be running through an introduction to the guide and outlining some of the key highlights. And then we are going to be joined by our panel of experts. So we've got Lisa, Simon, Sylvia, Mark, and Richard, who will be joining David. They're going to be discussing their key takeaways from the guide. They'll also be discussing some of the benefits, some of the common approach to SPO, and we will also be discussing Demand Path Optimisation, which was a fantastically written chapter in the guide. Finally, because this is live, we obviously do rely on audience participation. So you'll see at the very bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box. There's also a chat box. So please do post your questions throughout, and then at the end, David will pose those to the panel. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to pass over to David now, David Goddard.
Thank you very much, Helen, and hello audience. I will turn my camera on shortly, but to save Wi-Fi and hopefully get me through the next couple of slides, I'm just going to leave my camera off. My name is David Goddard, and I'm Double Verify's Senior Director of Business Development. I'm responsible for expanding partnerships with digital media and technology companies. I'm also the chair of IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee, which is a multi-stakeholder group which aims to increase understanding of the programmatic ecosystem, the impact it's having on digital advertising, and influence the industry initiatives or the industry via initiatives. And one such initiative is the SPO guide. Since the birth of digital advertising, the digital ad ecosystem has become increasingly sophisticated year after year. And this happened or appeared to have accelerated exponentially once programmatic entered the ecosystem, especially in more recent times with the introduction of new supply paths such as header bidding and other dynamic allocation solutions, which has led to a loss of transparency and increased opacity for advertisers and agencies, specifically related to the fees charged by intermediaries. This led to members of the IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee to create this guide to share their expertise on what SPO enables, demystify common misconceptions, highlight the importance of SPO for different stakeholder groups, and provide a step-by-step guide on how to start and implement SPO. The guide also features an overview on Demand Path Optimisation, or DPO, for publishers. I recommend that you go and download the guide after this session. However, you're about to get a taste of the guide's content now, as the panel will cover, or the upcoming panel will cover the overview of the newly released SPO guide and its most interesting findings, as well as address technicalities of supply path optimization and whether it's delivered on its promise to streamline buying via programmatic platforms. And the panel will also take a look at the publisher perspective on this matter, addressing demand path optimization mechanisms along with its key challenges and global best practice. Now, before I introduce the panel, we'll just jump to the next slide. I wanted to give you or do a quick SPO 101. So what is SPO? SPO grew out of the rise of header bidding, which resulted in a dramatic increase in the number of buying paths associated with each ad impression. The goal of SPO is to give buyers the most effective way to access inventory they care about the most through buying paths that are transparent, direct, and low cost. The process helps buyers find partners who will deliver the best outcomes and lead to the greater efficiency through spend consolidation. So who does SPO or DPO help? or impact? Well, SPO enables buyers to access the inventory that matters most to their business. Buyers can flip the challenges posed by the new supply dynamics into opportunities for better marketing and business outcomes. And at the other end of the ecosystem, DPO enables publishers to understand how their inventory is being bought and by who. So why the rise of SPO? Well, SPO is elevated in importance for buyers who work closely with strong exchange partners to leverage their advanced tools and technologies in order to capitalize on new supply dynamics and control their buying paths. The goal of SPO is for buyers to access the most efficient inventory, consolidating around the buying paths that are low cost and transparent. And how is SPO done? Well, SPO is conducted through a simple audit and evaluation, let's say an RFI process, enabling the buyer or the buy side to determine partners who drive value through their technology and service. There are different approaches to SPO, so buyers can leverage real-time algorithms from DSPs to make data-driven decisions, or initiate a more strategic approach working with fewer SSP partners who can offer incremental value and incentives, such as savings, operational efficiencies, and transparency. And we'll put all of this into our 101 fact sheet, which you will be able to download. I think a link will be appearing in the chat box shortly. And now I'm looking forward to introducing my panel. So as I said, I'll now stop talking and ask my fellow panelists and co-authors of the guide, which you can see on the screen here, but please introduce yourselves and answer the first question. What are your key takeaways from the guide?
Thanks, David. So I'm Lisa Kaluzny. I run demand across EMEA at Programmatic. And I think the key takeaway is really the highlights that you just mentioned, is the who, what, why, where, and when, is really decoupling the challenging opinion that an SPO could be, and really making it simple for everyone to understand and be able to grasp across the industry. So whether it's a brand or an agency or a trading desk, really being able to get that knowledge from them and from the guide.
And we're coming across the top.
Thank you very much. Sylvia, I'll come to you next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvia Ivanenko-Sayevska, and I am head of Buyer Central Europe at Magnite. In my role, I am responsible for building and expanding the relationships with media holdings, independent agencies, and brands in the region. For me, the published SPO guide, I think it was a great reminder on how to overcome the complexity in programmatic buying, since it touched on how and why to optimize the paths to supply. And secondly, and I would say even more important for me, this was the very first time I saw DPO and SPO discussed in one place. So for me, the published SPO guide was a huge testament to the bilateral relationship between buyers and sellers, highlighting on how to cut the noise between the buyers and sellers in the programmatic advertising.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And Simon.
Hi, so my name's Simon Baker, and I look after programmatic in EMEA for Bloomberg Media. So I think the thing that came out of the guide for me, without repeating anyone, is there's no silver bullet solution. Okay, the clue's in the title. It's called a guide. Okay, what works for Bloomberg might not necessarily work for another publisher. What works for a tier 1 publisher might not work for a tier 3 or tier 4 or tier 2 publisher. So I think the thing that was really good about the guide is it gave people some subjective or some commentary or some things to try to see what works. And it's the first time that I've seen any guide that's given a structure for people to take away and actually try and implement something tangible.
Thank you very much, Simon. Richard.
Hi, my name is Richard Nicholson. I head up demand side for Index Exchange in Europe. And I'd say for me, the one thing I took away was, the biggest thing I took away was that SPO really is an evolution. And I think the guide did a great job of detailing how we got here in the last 15, 16 years of digital media. buyers and sellers want to continue to get close to each other. And I think the detail that was laid out in the guide really shows how far we've come as an industry, and also clearly the steps that are going to be taken next to further that relationship.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Belsinger. I'm the Director of Publisher Business Development for Double Verify, expanding our newly launched publisher suite of technologies across Europe and the US. My big takeaway, and I think this is kind of a combination of what Sylvia and what Richard have said, is that there is this history between publishers and advertisers from an SPO and a DPO perspective. And what I found really interesting once we actually published the guide was how many of those questions, those existential questions about our industry, traverse across both sides for all these different partners, about how we've built and how we've evolved into the current landscape. I think it's really fascinating to see that expressed in the guide, maybe not as one of the key features, but as you read through it, the themes keep coming up over and over again around why do we do things the way we do, and how do we evolve into a more advanced industry. So I found that to be the most fascinating part of it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, all. We're going to first focus on SPO. And this is start with a two-part question. So what are, please can you explain to the audience, what are the problems that SPO is designed to solve? And what are the main benefits of SPO? Lisa, I'm going to come to you first again, if that's okay.
Yep, all good. And I will remember these questions this time, David, I promise. So in terms of what I think SPO is trying to solve is really understanding transparency and giving people the ability to look under the hood. So as we found that transparency seems to be one of the biggest pain points from the buy side, and understanding and being able to really track the spend of that dollar and what kind of that tech tax is. I think Mark Pritchard really called out the industry for this and pushed everyone to talk about it and be open with it. So step one about it, I think, is really about transparency. So being able to share with the buyer, you know, what's happening in the ecosystem, where's that cost going to, how much of that is going to Simon or any other publisher, really being able to share that. And then it's about control. So it's really giving people the opportunity, and by people I mean buyers, the ability to say, I want to buy this supply from this SSP, or I want to go to this publisher through this path. And whereas header bidding really kind of got rid of that selection, or if we can spend hours talking about whether that selection was even there. But since supply has become commoditized and you can pretty much get that impression from a number of different paths, SPO really allows the buyer to make that decision. And then my third piece will be about innovation. So I think that it really helps the buyer become innovative and allows them to work with their specific partners and push them to do those things. I kind of answered both of those questions together, but those are, I would say, are the main benefits and really the problems that it was trying to solve.
Perfect. And there was no right or wrong way to answer that question. And Sylvia, I'll come to you and I'll just remind you of the question because it's got two parts. What are the main problems SPO is?
Yeah, you were muted for a while, David, but I got to the question. So when we consider how the programmatic advertising changed in the last years, how header bidding democratized access to supply and how it multiplied the paths to the inventory the buyer are buying, I think we will then be able to answer the question, what SPO is designed for. It is designed to solve three issues. The first and foremost, I would say, is the complexity issue. So I would say SPO is about transforming complexity into simplicity. Furthermore, it's about the black box issue. So SPO is about bringing transparency into the programmatic buying. And lastly, and I think taking into consideration all the changes and privacy regulations and targeting limitations in the last months, I would say it is about bringing more efficiency to the programmatic buying. So having those three pillars, simplicity, transparency, and efficiency, SPO will be able to benefit the buyers. How? From the business operational perspective, I would say it allows easiness of campaign execution. Campaign execution through clear and trustworthy paths to supply. And also because of this trustworthy, clean supply, the buyer will be able to increase the performance of the campaign's execution and improve the KPIs. From the strategic point of view, I would say SPO allow to build a sustainable strategy which allows better performance, better efficiencies, and better productivity of the teams, which at the end should lead to the higher ROI for the buyers.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And Richard, the last point on SPO.
Yeah, so I'll focus on inventory quality. I think Lisa and Sylvia have kind of covered quite a lot of the main points. I think with quality, what we see is buyers looking to work with exchanges that are focused on ensuring that the inventory that they're offering up to the DSP that they're using is of the highest quality. And so that means a few things. One, it's working with industry standards like the IAB have released over the last few years, such as as.txt or sales.json, but also ensuring that their vendors are working with third parties that offer value in ensuring that that fraud and other kind of malicious activity is kept out of the transaction. So companies like Clean.io and such like. So ensuring that the vendors that you're using are clean and are free of fraudulent supply. That's going to impact also positively your campaigns. So that's one key point. And then again, I'll just pick up on leverage that buyers have. So as buyers start to work with fewer exchanges, then closer partnerships can develop. So whether that's a closer working relationship on product or trying to figure out with the vendor and publisher together how we want to transact in a certain way, those conversations can take place, and clearly buyers are going to pick those exchanges or vendors that are best going to suit their needs from a campaign perspective.
Thank you very much, Richard. Now, I'm keen to hear from Simon and Mark next around the DPO perspective or about DPO and the publisher perspective here, because it's also included in the guide. So, Simon, I'll come to you first. Really, it's the same question, but referring to DPO. What problems is DPO or Demand Path Optimization designed to solve for the publisher, and what are the main benefits?
So I think the really lovely thing here was that without any rehearsal, is like Lisa's answer is almost like the perfect answer. It's totally about transparency. So, we know for years we've been struggling with the whole transparency in the ecosystem, in the bid requests, where the revenue's going. And that's really the crux of what we're trying to solve from a DPO point of view. We're trying to get a better understanding on who's buying our inventory. More importantly, why they're buying our inventory, the third parties that are involved. I think third parties has a negative connotation. I don't mean it in a negative way. It just means understanding who is adding value and what value they're adding, and more importantly, what the fees are and what they're taking and what they're taking out of the approach. The approach publishers have taken for a number of years is, the more ad tech we plug in, the more revenue we get. Hey, surprise, that doesn't always work. So DPO allows us to kind of get behind the numbers, understand what's going on. We haven't been analytical enough, so DPO allows us to do that. Do we need the 58 SSPs that we've got plugged in? I'm being slightly facetious with the 58, but let's do more with less. So let's really get underneath that. And dare I say it's about unique demands. I know we all talk about it, but unique demands. What does each publisher, what does each partner bring to the table? What's the most efficient route? And it's really important when we're talking about this. It's really important for the sell side and the buy side. And notice I did say the buy side as well. This isn't a one-way street. SPO and DPO need to work in conjunction with each other. And it's about getting the pipes and the platforms in place so that we can all be more efficient and get the benefits from both sides.
Thank you, Simon. And lastly, Mark, same question. What are the challenges DPO are trying to address, and the main benefits as well from your perspective?
Yeah, I think Simon said the key word there is efficiency, right? From a publisher perspective, how do you drive the highest overall revenue with the least overall latency, right? And I think header bidding has introduced a myriad of new partners, technologies, and questions that publishers are asking. And I think some of those, again, Simon laid out of, who's buying my inventory, what are the fees that they're taking, what incremental value are they delivering, right? That's a very simple equation to say how efficient a partner are they, and judging and deciding who are your best partners to work with. And he also touched on, I think, an important factor: third parties are not necessarily a bad thing, right? They provide all the demand, they provide technology. Each one, in theory, provides some sort of incremental revenue, and therefore finding the right partners to work with is the right balance. I think one of the big challenges is transparency. Right? There is inherently a layer of obtrusification that occurs by working with SSPs that work with DSPs and laying out that supply chain. I think one of the first steps that we outline in the guide is simple mapping. It's just saying who is out there and how am I plugged into all these partners. And I think for a lot of the partners that I see I work with, that can be a really eye-opening process, just to say, wow, I needed to get a wrangle on this just to understand how complex my landscape is. And from there, you can start making more intelligent, informed choices. But that first step is a huge challenge. I think the next step is accurate data. Obviously, if you're trying to look at log level data, this can be an expensive process. You have to understand the ROI. How do you find, again, the individual cost of all these different partners, and simply just accessing what those transparencies need to be. So I think from an overall perspective, the efficiency of driving across your landscape, but first understanding what the roadmap looks like before you set out.
Thank you very much, all. I mean, both SPO and DPO sound like something everyone should be considering and doing, but then what is the cost? And that kind of leads me into the next question. So what are the common approaches to SPO and DPO? And what is the investment? So that can be cost and also resource to deliver both SPO and or DPO. And I'll add a little silly question on the end. Will it deliver ROI if I'm going to do it? So Richard, I'm going to come to you first with this question.
Sure, yeah. So I just kind of drafting off Mark's answer there around log level data. I think one of the big trends we see is around quality and buyers ensuring that they are getting what they're buying and getting what they pay for. And log level data plays obviously a big part in that. We've seen it evolve over the years from simple reporting to sending data dumps, and now log level data is something which is obviously in the psyche of the industry, and buyers are looking into it a lot more. Now, clearly, the investment there is a bit more significant than just receiving an Excel, but the advantage is that you get a kind of uneditable source of truth that you can then match with DSP logs. And we see that as a big trend right now. The cost is definitely a factor in terms of actually analyzing it and processing it, including if you're taking it from multiple sources. But we do see other companies in the ecosystem who are looking to do that as a service. So that may be one way that could be mitigated. But we know that, of course, some buyers do have the resources and analytics functions to actually ingest and process and analyze that data. So that is one. Will it deliver ROI? That's not for me to say. Not being a buyer, it's maybe a bit of a political answer, but clearly it's going to shine a light on those practices, the good practices of good players. So from a buyer point of view, if that's very important to their client, then that's going to be very valuable for them to be able to demonstrate that from log level data. And the other thing we're seeing is going in for the post cookie future. Buyers are starting to choose solutions that are going to enable them to buy in fact, not just as good as today with cookie targeting, but better with identifiers. So we expect to see that trend continue, and buyers leverage partnerships with vendors to ensure that they can deliver those audience-based campaigns, post next February, I believe, which is the latest kind of date, and continue to drive value for their advertisers. So those are the two I'd kind of highlight from the start.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Sylvia.
Yeah, we observe two approaches to SPO. The first one is the automated one, which is mostly driven by the algorithm and offered by the DSPs. And the second one, which I would say is mostly populated in the markets outside, is the manual SPO process, which built on the consolidation efforts. So what we observe when it comes to capacities and invest from the agencies and buyers into SPO processes, based on the observation in Central Europe, I would say normally there are no additional headcounts for SPO processes. So when the buyer executes SPO, it's normally the process is executed by the already existing trading teams and campaign managers. So with this one, I would then come to the third part of the questions, like what is their ROI, or can SPO support increased ROI? I would say definitely. Knowing that there are no additional headcounts for the SPO processes, and the SPO is executed by already existing trading teams, and knowing all the benefits which comes to the SPO process, like clean buying with increased performance of the campaign and control, I would say the ROI for agencies and for the advertisers are definitely higher.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. That's really good. I mean, it seems, and I'll come to you now next, Lisa, but it seems like our audience are looking also for, Alex Phillips posted a question, can anyone share an example of SPO initiative driving proven improvements in value from programmatic media spend? So Lisa, I guess that couples with, will it deliver ROI? So I'm going to come to you with the question around common approaches again. But again, Lisa or any others, if you do have any examples of ROI, that would be great to share on.
Yeah, I think that I would just comment about SPO is based on understanding what problem the buyer is trying to solve. So as much as Richard, I think log level data is great and we should all be doing that, we should all be sharing that. The conversations I've had with buyers have all said, yeah, I have no idea what I would do with that if you sent that to me. So the first step of SPO should always be understanding what the buyer is trying to solve. Because if they don't know what they're trying to solve for, then we can all as exchanges and publishers and ad tech providers go in and be like, hey, this is our solution. Hey, this is our solution. But they don't care. They have their kind of goals and they need to accomplish those goals. Those goals are ROI. So whether it's them really focusing on transparency and then asking their partners to be able to share things like log level data or provide them with additional information, or whether it's based on efficiencies or just consolidation, having that knowledge to understand what the problem is allows all of us to be more efficient and should therefore just in theory increase ROI for everyone involved, because you're cutting out the long tail. The agency or the buyer is no longer buying from 30 SSPs. The publisher is seeing more revenue because they're seeing their preferred path to that demand. So it kind of helps the whole ecosystem increase ROI.
If I could add one comment on this, I think it was Richard who said that the vendors or the parties in between the seller and buyer now with SPO can support or can deliver the service to the buyers. So this is like how we understand ROI. Knowing the majority, I would say, of agencies have like some capacities on people and teams. All the additional support who is coming through the parties from the external services is helping to build and increase the ROI. So this is the one thing, service voice. But the second thing is, like, as Lisa mentioned, knowing that with the since the SPO is built on the consolidation efforts, we know that the invest in the single SSPs will increase. Though SSPs will be able to support also with new tech products. So this is like what we do observe in Central Europe. So once the agency decide for 5 SSPs instead of 30, they will rely also on a better tech product support for them. So this would also lead to better and higher ROI for buyers.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to come to, again, the publisher side. And Simon, I mean, I'm making an assumption here. I guess you've dabbled with DPO, if not implemented it fully. So what are the common approaches, and maybe you can talk about first-hand experience that you took, and the investment as well? I mean, I'm not talking about sharing dollars, but this is both kind of technology investment and resource to deliver DPO for yourselves. And did you see?
Yeah, so let me try and add things that people haven't added before, which is always tricky when you go last on a question. Roles and responsibilities, I think, is the first interesting point. Like, whose job is this on the publisher side to actually implement DPO? So that's an interesting conundrum. So you've got really 3 simple buckets. You've got an operations role, which could easily take ownership and take charge. You've got a sales role, which could easily take charge, or you can outsource the entire problem and get a third party to come in. So they're the conundrums you have. So from my perspective, investment equals time. Okay, like asking for extra investment and headcount and resource at the moment, I think we can all nod in all of the panels and agree it's a pretty difficult conversation to have. So it's really about where do we tackle this? And at the moment, on no one's job spec do they have must run DPO. So what you tend to find is someone has a passion point internally. Now, it could be someone in sales, it could be someone in operations, but someone with a passion point tends to grab hold of this project. To clearly answer your last question, David, there is a massive revenue upside here. Okay, we're clearly seeing the benefits. You know that I can't talk about the details before I get a ton of LinkedIn messages. But we are seeing like 40% increments on certain eCPMs. We're seeing non-Google platforms producing lots more revenue than they've ever produced before just by making some basic tweaks. So it's a really big project. So the way I would answer it, you know, as I said right at the start, every publisher has a different way of working and a different way of approaching things. So we take a hybrid approach at Bloomberg. We've got operations and sales leading the DPO project. However, in the not too distant future, that we will be bringing in some expertise from outside who can look at things differently to the way we can look at them internally.
Thank you very much, Simon. And yeah, that was really clear picture of ROI potential. And it sounds like you're just on the start of your DPO journey there as well, which is really exciting. And you weren't the last. So Mark, you're the last one on the question, so it might be trickier to answer this, but yeah, I'd love to get your opinion.
Yeah, to maybe take a step back from a less tactical level and think more like holistically overall. I think when you're calculating ROI, there are, for a DPO process, there's a huge scale, right? You can say, look, we're going to just plug in every header bidder we possibly can and hope for the best, and not think about it too much. And if our I is really low, we're probably not going to see great R on the other side of that equation. On the other side, you know, if Simon's buying log level data from all 58 of his different SSP partners that he apparently works with, that might be a little bit too much, right? I think you have to find for each individual partner at that right balance of saying, this is how complicated our setup is. This is our strategy moving forward. This is how complicated we are as an organic publisher. Do we run a multitude of different properties? Do we have some network responsibilities? Are we entirely O&O? Are we working in video? Are we only working on display? Do we do more complex native units and are doing some custom kind of editorial stuff? Like, these are all the factors that need to go into that decision. And then deciding where on that scale do we need to land in terms of where are we going to continue to see return and incremental return on each new investment every time that we look at a technology, and we want to advance our understanding of programmatic. We want to understand our own media quality more organically. those are new steps that are now available, and therefore I see each publisher kind of needs to make that decision based on where they're at today and where they want to go in the future.
Thank you very much, Mark. I mean, the last few answers really lead nicely into the next question. It could be a really quick question, but Simon, I'm going to come to you first because you focused on people, which is really interesting, but I assume we need a technical fix. So is DPO for you a technical fix, or is it a greater shift responsibility to human experts? I'm assuming you're leaning towards the latter, but because of your last comment around the people in your organization, which is great to hear, technology is required.
Yeah, so this will probably start a little bit of debate, but I quite often joke that programmatic is a fully automated process that involves so much manual operational work. So I think I can see a few people are nodding already. So I'm very much leading. Did the computers lead us into this mess in the first place? And is that why we're sitting here talking about SPO and DPO? I would heavily suggest that while the log level data and the automation of reporting is critically important, no SSP's terminologies are the same, no offense, but they're not. So it's really hard. You need a level of human interaction to make sense of the reams and reams of data that this produces. So I'm very much voting for the human element.
It feels like Terminator, like human, but sorry, a very out of date comment. But Richard, I'm going to come to you because I know you focus heavily on the SPO. Is it the same for SPO? Is it a technical fix, or does it shift greater responsibility to human experts?
Yeah, I think I largely agree with Simon. It's going to be a mixture, and we require humans to make decisions and innovate and find solutions to these problems. And once those solutions are found, how do we scale them, and how do we automate them, and how do we also find a common way of working together? The OpenRTB spec is an obvious example of somewhere where the industry has collaborated, but there are many others. And I'm sure those examples of collaboration will continue. Now, of course, there's always going to be the next thing, right, that has to be figured out, and that will probably just be a continuous process. But as long as the market and the participants in it continue to automate and scale these solutions, then I think you're always going to see a mixture of human and computer working together.
Fantastic, thanks, Richard. And Lisa, are you siding on the tech side, or is it a bit of both?
I was going to go with Simon. I think it's human. Technology has built programmatic, and that's why we're all sitting here today. But as Sylvie just mentioned earlier, it's all about the customer service, and it's all about what else you can offer. So if we're all using the OpenRTB spec and we're all providing the same tech, then what are we doing from an innovation standpoint? And then also, what are we doing from a human standpoint? Because I think we all would rather do business with people we like, and people we can collaborate with, and people we can really build that relationship with. And I think that's what differentiates any of us. And I know that when we're hiring salespeople or we're hiring partnership people, it's always about who do you know, who are you friends with? So it has to go back to that human element, because when tech, doesn't work or tech changes, you have to have that compassion, that understanding, that relationship, and also that support. I mean, I'm sure Simon, when he needs something from people, he has his go-to people that he reaches out to, and that's why they're their partners. I know our agency partnerships, we're partners with these people because we speak to them all the time. Again, with the publishers, we speak to these people all the time, and it all falls back on the human element of it. Otherwise, we'd all be robots.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, David, if I can allow myself to refer to one of the statements one of the demand partners told me a few months ago, like having the option between the automated and manual SPO, what he could choose. He said, I do really like the autopilot function in my car. but it's still myself who's pushing on the button. So I think this is the same, like what we could say here with SPO.
I like that. And it's nice to know that we do still have some control in our ecosystem. We're not leaving it all to tech, but that leads me nicely to the next question. Lisa, I want to come to you first again, because it's one on consolidation. Is SPO and DPO accelerating the consolidation in the ad tech market?
100%. So I know that's not just my whole answer. I think that, if Simon was really selling his inventory on 58 SSPs and found out that he was selling it on 58 SSPs, somebody would say, why am I doing that? So let's cut it down. And I think that very much we're seeing from the buy side, waking up and saying, why am I buying from 30, 40, 50, 60 exchanges? Like, I really need, is it 10? Is it 5? Is it 2? But really realizing and recognizing that. So that those steps are already happening. The actual optimization is being done by DSPs. They're choosing that supply path, and the tech is there. And I think the industry has woken up, and that long tail is definitely being shaved off. Quicker by some than by others, but it's definitely occurring, and we are all getting smaller from a consolidation standpoint and as an industry, but not, as companies, we're all growing.
Thank you very much. And Mark, is DPO having the same effect on the industry? Is it consolidating the ad tech market? And can we be as sure as no?
Yeah, I think Lisa's dead on. We are in the age of consolidation, but I think that's actually more of a response to the last couple of years, really where publishers went from working with maybe 3, 4 on the high side, 5, 6 partners to working with 14, 20 different partners directly. I think that's just, we were in an age of expansion previously, and now we're kind of thinning down as we optimize these paths. When I think long term about whether this will lead to consolidation or not, I think about the evolution of the space. And when I talk about evolution, I mean in a very Darwinian sense, not necessarily the largest or the strongest partners, but the best fit, right, are the ones that are going to survive. And I see that for publishers, there's an opportunity to look for more specified partners, right? A great example of this, I think, is in travel, which has been hit very hard this year in particular. I know a number of travel publishers that are now saying we're going to look at direct boutique travel agencies and try to foster relationships there that may have been handled previously by other partners. And that is, again, part of DPO. Or now that we're in Q4, I know from previous experience, looking at retargeters, right? Their budget swells tremendously in Q4 based on the nature of their business. It may make sense to work with that partner for the next 2 months. I don't know if it's a long-term strategy, but I think this is where we get into the more nuanced conversation around having that fit partner. And therefore, I think that long-term we'll go through times of expansion, we'll go through times of contraction, but I hope that DPO and SPO both lead to more diversification in the space, more specialization, and therefore a more stable ecosystem overall. Because obviously we're all concerned around the really long-term view of having consolidation at too great a risk. I think there's just going to be that natural back and forth between the two. But if we can land in some sort of happy medium, that'll be a much more stable industry for the future.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm just going to leave my camera off due to save some of my Wi-Fi for the audio. And Sylvia, I'm going to ask the same question of you, but obviously from the SPO side.
Definitely, and this is like what we observe in Central Europe already, that when the agencies execute SPO, and I would say this is 95% of all agencies here in the region, they are starting with consolidation already. So the very first step for the agencies is look into like how many SSP we do buy, cut out all the no names, no brands SSPs, just to avoid the unnecessary noise in programmatic buying, and then consolidate to 20 as a very initial step. In the second phase of the SPO, they consolidate to 10 SSPs to come to final free for candidates. It's depending on the market characteristics. So definitely SPO lead to market consolidation, and this is also like part of our SPO recommendation we are giving to the buyers here in the market as part of our service and support. And from my perspective, I would say this is a good step, just because header bidding wake the desire for the market and the new market players. Not every market player was a good one. So this is like to SPO and the consolidation is about cleaning up the industry, just because there is too much more noise at today's stage.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And Simon, finally, I'm going to come to you. This time you are the last, so you may be covering some old ground. But talking about DPO and consolidation, has this led to you to use less than 58 SSPs? I'm joking. I know you don't use 58 SSPs, but has it led to you leading to consolidation on your?
Yeah, that was going to be my first comment. That's a joke I may regret saying, 58 SSPs. Yeah, so a couple of observations from my side. I think if you've got a unique USP, it's not going to lead to consolidation. I think if you've got a unique selling proposition, unique to market, consolidation is not going to happen. However, from where I stand, and apologies, a lot of ad tech players look the same. They feel the same. They look like they offer the same. And I think sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference. So from where I stand, I think consolidation is on the cards. It's a case of when it's going to happen, not if it's going to happen. In answer to your last question, David, yes, we've already made decisions since we've started this process. So obviously I'm not going to name vendors and numbers and things like that, but we have reduced the number of partners we work with already. I highly suspect we will make further decisions in Q4 about the number of partners that we're working in with to create greater efficiency.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come straight to you again, Simon, on the next question. And I'm actually going to combine it. And you said at the start, have I got any curveballs? And I don't think this is a curveball, but our audience has provided me with what could be a curveball. So the question I'm going to ask is, does the buy side and sell side share the same interest when it comes to SPO and DPO? And Alex Phillips, it kind of goes hand in hand with this question. Alex Phillips asked, to what extent should buyers expect to influence pubs' choice in technology? And similarly, to what extent should pubs expect to influence buyers' choice in technology? So it's an interesting one. Do we share the same kind of interest when it comes to our approach to supply path of demand, path optimization? And do opposite sides of the ecosystem influence technology choices by the other?
Cool. I lost quite a bit of that question, David, so I'm going to make the bit up in the middle that I think you said. So to start with, I think we opened it really nicely because Lisa spoke about transparency and I spoke about transparency. So if we call that buy side, sell side, so I think we have a very common interest in transparency. However, I think where our paths differ, and this is really from a trading desk agency perspective, the agencies are trying to access our inventory at a cheaper, lower point, or shall I call it a more effective rate? And we are trying to recuperate from a publisher perspective some of the revenue that's gone missing in the ecosystem. So we're trying to sell at a higher eCPM and get higher revenues. So I think that's where the SPO and DPO kind of go on separate routes, is around where the revenue goes. So that's one of the concerns. I think you asked about technology and can agencies influence the technology that publishers work with? Well, yeah, I would totally agree with that statement. So, you know, if we pick an agency group that has a high proportion or high propensity of Bloomberg clients, and we don't happen to be working with that SSP, for example, we will onboard that SSP. What is the point of not following what the buyer's doing? It would just be crazy. So equally, if we're working with an SSP that agencies or trading desks aren't working with and we're not seeing any revenue, maybe that's a reason to offboard them. So yeah, I think that the buy side can totally influence what the sell side's doing.
And thank you very much. You read into the broken language really, really well. Do you think it could happen the other way around? Could a publisher influence a buyer's decision?
Was that question back to me?
Yes, sorry. I was going to say, if the shoe was on the other foot and you were asking a buyer to say, could you use this DSP, for example, or funnel your revenue through this SSP, would the buyer listen?
The buyer would always listen. Whether they would look, let's be really truthful. Whoever holds the budget is in control of the decisions, really. So I think it would, as much as I could encourage a buyer to use a certain SSP or a certain ad tech product because of efficiencies and transparencies and all the things we've discussed, I can't force them to do it. So I think we can encourage and support, but ultimately these decisions lie on the buyer side.
Thank you very much. Really, really clear. And Lisa, the same question to you. And I just wondered whether you've seen as well, in addition to that, a buy side influence in publisher decisions or vice versa as well.
Yeah, I think what I've seen is actually SPO push for buyers to have a decision and have an opinion. I think historically, the opinion of where that money flows and how that flows has always been on the publisher side, because the publishers have been the ones with the relationships with the SSPs. The buyers just care about which DSP they buy from. But SPO has opened the door for buyers to be having conversations with their supply partners and understanding what the USP is of each supply partner, and understanding whether, you know, the supply that they're providing is clean and it's brand safe and has, you know, the bells and whistles or the needs that their brands are really looking for. So the buyers are now saying, you know, they're looking under the hood and they're saying, okay, well, this is the pipe I want to use. So I think previously they would go to the publisher and say, hey, I want to set up this PMP deal. And the publisher would be like, great, here's the deal ID from somebody. And then that would be the whole kind of conversation between the agency and the publisher. Now the buyer is saying, okay, well, this is our preferred route to supply, and then having that conversation with the publisher. And I think that moving forward, what I'd love to see is kind of having that conversation with everyone. I know I've said this before, is like, we're better if we do it together, and we're able, you know, if we're able to triangulate the conversation, if we're able to get everyone at the table, you then have a more efficient ecosystem and you have a more transparent ecosystem, because everyone understands the value that they're bringing to the table. It's no longer a race to the bottom. It's more about how do we make sure that, you know, the publishers are paid what they value their inventory at, and how do we make sure that the brands are getting the value for the ads, their ads are being seen, and that's, you know, we're providing the best quality supply.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mark, I'm just going to come back to that original question with regards to do the buy side and sell side share the same interests when it comes to SPO and DPO? Is that something you're seeing?
Yeah, I organically believe so. And I think we kind of touch on, it's a very natural, I don't want to say conflict, but let's say prioritization of strategies between the buy side and between the sell side. And that, I think, unifies when we think about quality, right? Advertisers and brands are looking for qualities according to their campaign KPIs. Publishers, in large part, are looking for quality CPMs in exchange for that quality inventory. So I think that when we talk about trying to find the right technology to facilitate those exchanges, as Lisa and Simon both say, looking for transparent partners, finding the right solution from both a publisher and from an advertiser perspective, I think this is where we talk about having SPO and DPO are two sides of almost the same coin, is because of the exchange of that quality, but also the search for the right platforms to do that exchange on. I think that's where these two kind of converge.
Sorry, I dropped off the web right at the end, Mark, but I'm back on now. Thank you very much. I don't know how long I was gone for, but Richard, that question again. So does the buy side and the sell side share the same interest when it comes to SPO and DPO?
Yeah, I think my fellow panelists have made some good points already, and I don't want to kind of go over them. And I think I just call out one example today around audience-based buying and the future of that post the deprecation of the third-party cookie. And we are seeing a lot of collaboration and discussion between buy side and sell side around, okay, what is that going to look like in the future, and how can we ensure that on the one hand, publishers are able to fund their content in the way that they want to through offering valuable audience-based buying, and on the other hand, how do buyers and advertisers going to actually ensure that they target the right groups of people that they want to in a future without cookies. So we're seeing a lot of collaboration there, and I think in that example, the interests of supply and demand are very much aligned. So we would expect that hopefully to kind of continue over the next 12-18 months, and hopefully good solutions can be found for the ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Look, we've got one last question, and we're going to ask all 5 of you this last question, but in the because we've only got a couple of minutes left, I'm going to say in one sentence or maybe 2 sentences, can you answer the following? Who is responsible for SPO and DPO, and what advice would you give to them? So Mark, I'm going to come to you first. So it has to be quick and snappy. Apologies about that.
No worries. I would say in terms of who's responsible for DPO, everyone within the organization, be it programmatic, ad ops, sales, even bleeding into editorial when we think about media quality, I'd say holistically. And my advice would be to approach with an open mind. The DPO guide was meant to be really mental kindling to start that fire and start asking questions. Where it takes you is really up to you.
Thank you very much. And Richard?
Yeah, I'd say also on the buy side, investment teams, the trading teams, and the client teams as well. There are bits that everyone can look into and figure out where it's going to provide the most value. And any advice, I'd say figure out what is most important to you, and then ask your partners around that. There are so many things that you can do, but narrowing down on what's going to provide you value, I think, is the way for success.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Simon?
So I kind of almost half answered this before. So the most passionate person, the person who cares or is interested or intrigued enough or can see the biggest tangible benefit. I don't think it's right for me to say it's an operations or sales or a consultant's role, but the most passionate person should definitely lead it. And where to start? Look, do something rather than nothing. That's the best piece of advice I can give anyone. Jump in, play with some data, work out what you want to get out of it. Look, we work in sales. What do we want to get out of it? More revenue. There's a really easy starting point. Work it backwards from there.
Thank you very much. Sylvia?
Yes, SPO is about better buy outcomes. So better outcomes, I would say, is everyone thing. So everyone should be encouraged to start asking questions and make all the best to find best pipe to the desired inventory. And to advise, ask questions, don't be afraid, and don't overcomplicate. It's a simple process.
Thank you very much. And Lisa?
Thanks, David. I think be curious. If this is a topic that is at all of interest to you, ask questions or read up about it. Everyone will be more than happy to answer any of those questions on this panel. And then I think the advice is know the problem that you're trying to solve for.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you very much, panelists, for sharing your knowledge. And thank you very much, audience, for listening in. We're out of time, but I'm just going to quote Simon's advice. If you're going to do something rather than nothing, please go to IAB Europe and download the SPO and DPO guide as the starting point for your future in SPO or DPO. Thank you very much, everybody.